Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Miriam Terlinchamp, and I am pleased to welcome you into this Shabbat-ish experience. It's an effort that we've been doing for the last few years, myself and Ric Hordinski, trying to craft a spiritual experience that would lead you into Shabbat, into the sacred period of rest that happens every week, with the roots of Jewish tradition, but more of a creative lens of how we can actually access it. Today, I want to talk a lot about mystery and trying not to define that mystery. When I think about our forefather Abraham, we tell the story early in Genesis that Abraham should lech lecha, that God calls to him and says, go forth into this land and start this new journey. And then he gets up and he does it. And so it's really easy to dismiss it as some guy who just hears something crazy and does it, or maybe some very holy person who hears something and does it in a way that we cannot. Maimonides, one of our sages, says that Abraham was picked because when he looked up at the stars, he saw constellations and understood that there was order in the universe, and there had to be a primary first call of some kind. He was the first one to see it. Regardless of how we define those first acts of faith in our tradition, what we do understand is that we don't have the full story, that Abraham wasn't deluded, we just didn't know the whole story. And I think that can be the same true as how we talk about God or Yahweh or Adonai, however we say the words, or how we talk about tradition. And even more, I think in the most sort of extreme way, we embrace the fact of mystery as a sacred process is when we talk about the afterlife. The Jews are so good at defining death practices, what we do with the grieving, how we handle the body, what we talk about the soul. That's all very organized and ritualized and all about community and connection in this world. But when it comes to talking about the afterlife, that gets surrendered to mystery. That we can think about it, we can be creative about it, we can write stories about it, but the underlining understanding is that it's only part of the story and that there's no way that we can really define it. And that mystical truth then becomes this radical embrace of mystery. And the reason we do any of this prayer practice is to get closer to mystery, not to define it. I think we should be wary of anyone who defines mystery or feels like they have an answer. But the goal is to elevate ourselves and just get a little closer to it, to feel it's tangible, to be, to rejoice in that mystery. And the goal, of course, of elevation is personal transcendence, and the goal of personal transcendence is to translate that transcendence into love and connection with other people. And in fact, if our world was more oriented towards mystery or towards the mystical experience, it absolutely would be better. In this spiritual experience of Shabbat-ish, you'll be hearing all this original liturgy and music written by Ric Hordinski. And the words we're going to say are from this book called Some. I really encourage you to read it. It's so amazing. And it's a creative exercise on writing 40 tales of the afterlife, 40 just beautiful, creative midrashim, stories of the afterlife. And the reason we're doing it here is just it's an embodiment of what we do in the Shabbatish experience, which is to celebrate in the creativity of it. And we hope that as you're listening to these stories to find what works for you. And maybe it's just the act of the poetry of it all. Maybe it'll be the way the liturgy sort of enters you. And maybe for you, it'll give you just a little bit closer to the mystery of what you understand happens when we die. With Jews doing death so well, and our practice of death so well, I think the best thing we do is that we don't codify or force ourselves into the specific. And so as you hear Ed's voice and my own voice read these stories, we hope it lifts you to something else and something bigger. Shabbat Shalom.
As iron sharpens iron, so we make our world, our world. As iron sharpens iron, so we take our turn, turn our world. I may not be the one to finish this work, but I will not take my hand from the plow, not now. As iron sharpens iron, so we take our turn, turn our world. As iron sharpens iron, so we take our turn, our world. I may not be the one to finish this work, but I will not take my hand from the plow, not now. As iron sharpens iron, so we make our world, our world. As iron sharpens iron, so we take our turn, turn our world. I may not be the one to finish this work, but I will not take my hand from the plow, not now. As iron sharpens iron, so we take our turn, turn our world.
In the afterlife, you relive all your experiences, but this time with the events reshuffled into a new order. All the moments that share a quality are grouped together. You spend 2 months driving the street in front of your house, 7 months having sex. You sleep for 30 years without opening your eyes. For 5 months straight, you flip through magazines while sitting on a toilet. You take all your pain at once, all 27 intense hours of it. Bones break, cars crash, skin is cut, babies are born. Once you make it through, it's agony-free for the rest of your afterlife. But that doesn't mean it's always pleasant. You spend 6 days clipping your nails, 15 months looking for lost items, 18 months waiting in line, 2 years of boredom, staring out a bus window, sitting in an airport terminal, 1 year reading books. Your eyes hurt and you itch because you can't take a shower until it's your time to take your marathon 200-day shower. 2 weeks wondering what happens when you die. 1 minute realizing your body is falling. 77 hours of confusion. 1 hour realizing you've forgotten someone's name. 3 weeks realizing you're wrong. 2 days lying. 6 weeks waiting for a green light. 7 hours vomiting. 14 minutes experiencing pure joy. 3 months doing laundry. 15 hours writing your signature. 2 days tying shoelaces. 67 days of heartbreak. 5 weeks driving lost. 3 days calculating restaurant tips. 51 days deciding what to wear. 9 days pretending you know what is being talked about. 2 weeks counting money. 18 days staring into the refrigerator. 34 days longing. 6 months watching commercials. 4 weeks sitting in thought, wondering if there's something better you could be doing with your time. 3 years swallowing food. 5 days working buttons and zippers. 4 minutes wondering what your life would be like if you reshuffled the order of events. In this part of the afterlife, you imagine something analogous to your earthly life, and the thought is blissful. A life where episodes are split into tiny, swallowable pieces, where moments do not endure, where one experiences the joy of jumping from one event to the next, like a child hopping from spot to spot on the burning sand.
Brother, my brother, did the shadow grow long? Brother, my brother, did you lose your thread in this song? Sister, did you hold out your hand for so long? When you cross that river, did you lay your burden down? Father, my father, how I wish I were a lamp in the dark, a boat for those who cross the flood, a raft or a bridge to love. Did you utter a prayer to the silence? Did you wonder why I'd one last time? Were your eyes dry in silence? Has your fist lost its grip on the line? When you cross that river, did you lay your burden down? When you cross that river, did you lay your burden down? I won't drag this burden behind me. I won't carry this weight anymore. I see holding on keeps the pain closer to me, though I come to it later than most.
In the afterlife, you discover that God understands the complexities of life. She had originally submitted to peer pressure when she structured her universe like all the other gods had, with a binary categorization of people into good and evil. But it didn't take long for her to realize that humans could be good in so many ways and simultaneously corrupt and mean-spirited in other ways. How was she to arbitrate who would go to heaven and who to hell? Might not it be possible, she considered, that a man could be an embezzler and still give to charitable causes? Might not it be possible for a woman to be an adulteress and give pleasure and security to two men's lives? Might not it be possible for a child to divulge secrets that splinter a family? Dividing the population into two categories of good and bad seemed like a more reasonable task when she was younger. But with experience, these decisions became more difficult. She composed complex formulas to weigh hundreds of factors and ran computer programs that rolled out on long strips of paper with eternal decisions. But her sensitivities revolted at this automation. And when the computer generated a decision that she disagreed with, she took the opportunity to kick out the plug in rage. That afternoon, she listened to the grievances of the dead from two warring nations. Both sides had suffered. Both sides had legitimate grievances. Both pled their cases earnestly. And so she covered her ears and moaned in misery because she knew her humans were multidimensional, and she could no longer live under the rigid architecture of her youthful choices. Not all gods suffer like this, and we can consider ourselves lucky that in death we answer to a God with deep sensitivity to the Byzantine hearts of her creations. For months, she moped around her living room in heaven, head drooped like a bulrush, while the lines piled up. Her advisors advised her to delegate the decision-making, but she loved her humans too much to let them be cared for somebody else. In a moment of desperation, the thought crossed her mind to let everyone just wait in line indefinitely and let them work it out on their own. But then a better idea struck her generous spirit. She could afford it. She would grant everyone, every last human, a place in heaven. After all, everyone had something good inside. It was part of the design specifications. And her new plan brought back the bounce in her gait, returned the color to her cheeks. And she shut down the operations in hell, fired the devil, and brought every last human to be by her side in heaven. Newcomers, old-timers, nefarious, righteousness. Under the new system, everyone gets equal time to speak with her. Now, most people find her a little garrulous and overly solicitous, but she can't be accused of not caring. The most important aspect of her new system is that everyone is treated equally. There's no longer fire for some and harp music for others. The afterlife is no longer defined by cots versus water beds, raw potatoes versus sushi, hot water versus champagne. Everyone is a brother to all. And for the first time, an idea has been realized that never came to fruition on earth: true equality. And the communists are baffled and irritated because they finally achieved their perfect society, but only by the help of a God in whom they don't want to believe. And the meritocrats are abashed that they're stuck for eternity in an incentiveless system with a bunch of pinkos. And the conservatives have no penniless to disparage, and the liberals have no downtrodden to promote. So God sits on the edge of her bed and weeps at night, because the only thing that everyone can agree upon is that they're all in hell.
I see the broken promise and we don't know what that means. The space between our minds and hearts, the space between the flesh, is the temple, nothing more or less. This is what holy means. All we build turns to dust. All our golden words dissolve to rust. The sun rises, the sun sets, and there's nothing new to see. 'Cause all we have is what we are. This is what holy means. I see the broken promised land from the tower of our dreams, through the curtain of the air we share, though we don't know what that means. The space between our minds and hearts, the space between the flesh, is the temple, nothing more or less. This is what holy means. Everything has beauty in its time. Let's eat our bread with laughter and drink our wine with a merry heart, the joy divine. For two are better than one, and I only am because you are. This is what holy means. I see the broken promise land from the tower of our dreams, through the curtain of the air we share, though we don't know what that means. The space between our minds and hearts, the space between the flesh, is the temple, nothing more or less. This is what holy means. I see the broken promised land from the tower of our dreams, through the curtain of the air we share, though we don't know what that means. The space between our minds and hearts, the space between the flesh, is the temple, nothing more or less. This is what holy means.
In the afterlife, you are treated to a generous opportunity. You can choose whatever you would like to be in the next life. Would you like to be a member of the opposite sex, born into royalty, a philosopher with bottomless profundity, a soldier facing triumphant battles? But perhaps you've just returned here from a hard life. Perhaps you were tortured by the enormity of the decisions and responsibilities that surrounded you. And now there's only one thing you yearn for: simplicity. That's permissible. So for the next round, you choose to be a horse. You covet the bliss of that simple life. Afternoons of grazing in grassy fields, the handsome angles of your skeleton and the prominence of your muscles, the peace of the slow flicking tail, or the steam rifling through your nostrils as you lope across snow-blanketed plains. You announce your decision. Incantations are muttered, a wand is waved, and your body begins to metamorphose into a horse. Your muscles start to bulge. A mat of strong hair erupts to cover you like a comfortable blanket in winter. The thickening and lengthening of your neck immediately feels normal as it comes about. Your carotid arteries grow in diameter. Your fingers blend hoofward. Your knees stiffen. Your hips strengthen. And meanwhile, as your skull lengthens into its new shape, your brain races in its changes. Your cortex retreats as your cerebellum grows. The homunculus melts man to horse. Neurons redirect, synapses unplug and replug on their way to equestrian patterns. And your dream of understanding what it is like to be a horse gallops toward you from the distance. Your concern about human affairs begins to slip away. Your cynicism about human behavior melts, and even your human way of thinking begins to drift away from you. Suddenly, for just a moment, you are aware of the problem you overlooked. The more you become a horse, the more you forget the original wish. You forget what it is like to be a human, wondering what it was like to be a horse. This moment of lucidity does not last long, but it serves as the punishment for your sins, a Promethean entrails-pecking moment, crouching half horse, half man, with the knowledge that you cannot appreciate the destination without knowing the starting point. You cannot revel in the simplicity unless you remember the alternatives. And that's not the worst of the revelation. You realize that the next time you return here with your thick horse brain, you won't have the capacity to ask to become a human again. You won't understand what a human is. Your choice to slide down the intelligence ladder is irreversible. And just before you lose your final human faculties, you painfully ponder what magnificent extraterrestrial creature, enthralled with the idea of finding a simpler life, chose in the last round to become a human.
There's not a single God, but many. Each rules a separate territory. And despite the best guesses of erstwhile civilizations, the gods do not hold dominion over categories of war and love or wisdom. Instead, the divisions are much finer-grained. One god has control over objects made of chrome, another over flags, another over bacteria, the god of telephones, the god of bubblegum, the god of spoons. These are the players in an incalculably large panoply of deific bureaucracy. There is always disputed territory. It is the interaction within this substantial administration that determines the random walk of the world. Everything interesting happens at the borders between domains of power. So while you may be pleased to know that there is after all, divine intentionality, you may be disappointed to know that no two gods can agree. There are so many that it is difficult for them to enjoy any consequence except during brief statistical hiccups. Just as the Greeks surmised, there's bitter competition among the gods. Jealous rivalries abound because the stakes are so low. The gods are not large or powerful, and they know it. So they try their best to stand out and to be heard, given the limits of their random talents and the cards that they are dealt. They discover themselves tossed into a sea of interaction with strangers, struggling for progress in a network of jealous competition. Many of them embrace a suspicion that something extraordinary could happen if they could collaborate on a meaningful scale. But they find themselves continually stymied by the personalized nature of their goals. Lately, it has become popular to theorize that their incapacity to coordinate is the only reason that they haven't destroyed us. But the truth is, they're fond of us, and they work to keep us protected. And when they feel overwhelmed by their own struggles, they sit down and observe a traffic jam. They watch how each human driver aims for his own private piece of the city, isolated from neighbors by layers of glass and steel. Some of the humans reach out to make cell phone contact with a single friend out of the innumerable hordes. And gazing out over the steering wheel, each human feels the intensities of joy and grief as though his were the only real examples in the world. Among all the creatures in creation, the gods favor us. We're the only ones who can emphasize with their problems.
You are not alone. You are not alone. We are all of us made for each other. You are not alone. You are not alone. We are all of us made for each other. We are all of us made for each other. You are not alone. You are not alone. We are all of us made for each other.
Throughout this worship experience, we've been weaving story and song, and we've been talking a lot about what happens after we die. We hope that one of the messages that you're leaving with is that we don't know. It's everyone's best guess. What we hope is true, though, is the understanding that our bodies are not just bodies, but bodies with an eternal spirit within it. That on Shabbat, today, that this other sense, this other spirit, this other soul comes and visits us and reminds us of our best selves. And that after we die, those two soul components connect, whether that means that we return to God, whether that means that we're reconciling what happens on earth. Regardless, we aspire to this idea that we will eventually land up someplace with more peace, and then that wisdom and love will translate back here on earth. In our tradition, we always share the names of those who are no longer living in this world. And the hope is that through the sharing of their memories, their positive actions on earth will guide us in some capacity. This links for me to Psalm 23, a prayer of consolation, that we're going to walk through difficult valleys, that we're going to go through hard times. But in the end, I don't have to be scared, because I am accompanied, because I am not alone. With its energy, we continue with Psalm 23 and remind ourselves of all the holy people who are no longer living, but are among us in spirit and energy. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i le'achzar binot deshet yarbitzeini. Almei minuchot yan aleini nafshi yoshvev, yan cheni vegmalet tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech betzetzal mavet lo irat ra ki ata imadi. Shivtacha umishantacha hamaniachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shalcha neget sa'arai, tishanta v'Hashem en roshi kosir rayai. Ach, tov v'chesed yirafuni kol yamei chayai, v'shavti b'vei Adonai la'orach yamim. Adonai, my shepherd, I lack for nothing. In meadows thick with grass, you lay me down. Across streams serene, you guide me. My life, you restore, leading me serenely in well-worn paths of justice to glorify your name. And even when I walk in a valley dark as death's shadow, I shall fear no ferocity, for you are with me, ki ata imadi. Your staff and your walking stick, they reassure me. You set a table before me along with my enemies. You rain rich oils round my head, and my cup it's overflowing. For certain goodness and love of your covenant will run after me all the days of my life. And I shall abide in God's house for long days, long days. In our community, we remember this week John Matisoff, David Lynn, Charlotte Marcus, Richard Robbins, Pauline Stothoff, Janet Winston, Jean Goldberg, Bernard Barron, Christy Gukian, Linda Schwartz, Joseph Feigenblatt, Henry Lauder, Elizabeth Silverman, Charles Brown, Sarah Solomon Feldstein, Rose Schwartz, Shulamit Infeld, Bruce Rothman, Arnold Brown, Bertha Lebovich, Margaret Fraser, Ben Willis, Robert Rubin, Dr. Meryl Goldman. May their memories be forever a blessing as we continue with our words of consolation and affirmation. Yitgadal v'kadash shemei Rabbi, be'alma divrach kirete v'yamlich machute, b'chayachon uvyomachon uv'chaye dechol be'Yisrael, b'gala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbi mevarach le'olam u'me'amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei kedusha brichu. Le'ela u'le'ela min kol berachata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata ta'amiram v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'marav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol Yishvei Tevel v'imru. Amen.
a sliver of moon climbing over the hill. The night's too big to swallow, it's too tough to kill. You're 2 foot sore to run, and you're too worn to fight. So you close your eyes and wait for the light. You sat in the garden with your back to the wall, afraid to sit pretty, afraid to stand tall. You ate of the fruit, still you don't know what's right. So you close your eyes and wait for the light. Wait for the light, wait for the light. Like a babe in the cradle with the shutters drawn tight. When the oil in your lamp won't last the night, you just close your eyes and wait for the light. In a fallow field waiting till spring is in sight. Oh, you sag and you sing and you break in the night. 'Cause your heart is a sparrow that's too tired to take flight. So you close your eyes and wait for the light. Wait for the light, wait for the light. Close your eyes and wait for the light. When you hear the chain creaking and the collar seems tight, you just close your eyes and wait for the light. Wait for the light, wait for the light. Close your eyes and wait for the light. Through the smoke of the battle, when there's no land in sight, you just close your eyes and wait.